Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session with 3 lightning talks. Anya and I are in the room. I think the third presenter is online, but we haven't quite worked out how that's going to happen. Okay, great. And actually, she's just confirmed that she's online and has slides ready. So after I've done mine and Anya's done hers, we'll transfer over. Certainly, Anya and I were under the belief that we had about 10 minutes for a talk. So we've prepared some fairly sort of condensed things, but it turns out we've got 3 10-minute talks in 90 minutes. So that means both that we can go over by talking and hopefully we'll get a good time for questions. So I think we're going to organize it so we allow questions after each talk if there are any and have a discussion. So my name is Simeon Warner from Cornell University, and I'm going to talk about making FOLIO happen. If I can find the advanced button.
Really? Oh.
Huh. Okay. So first question, why am I, a relative FOLIO newbie, here talking about the making of FOLIO happen, which has happened by lots of people, not including me? So my credentials or reasons for doing this are I'm co-chair of the Community Council, and I think the most important function of the Community Council is the health of the community. And FOLIO is a stupendous success, but I think there are some sort of underlying issues which sort of rise up and cause problems now and then. There is, partly because people like me come in late to the game. It's like, well, what went before? What's the history? How did things come to the way they are? And how do we get a handle on all of this community? There's a lot of it. You know, we have a sort of tip of an iceberg here in person at this conference. We have more people online and we have more people beyond that. It's a big community, a big project. And I think there are a number of tensions that sort of underlie some awkwardness in some discussions we have. How do we set priorities in FOLIO? Where are we going, big picture? How does what I need to go live get done? Everyone who's in the go live phase really thinks about that one. But then broadly, you know, how do I influence what's going forward? And so I'm going to sort of talk very vaguely around these issues. And I want to note that the things I'm going to express here are my opinions, not necessarily those of Cornell, not necessarily those of the people I spoke to try and gather some information, but hopefully it will be a useful discussion. So I thought when I started the idea of a lightning talk, I wanted to say 3 things. FOLIO happens because of the effort and skill of a great many people applied in alignment with the vision. That's kind of a sort of an acknowledgement statement. You know, it's true going forward, but it's what got us here. But then one of the things that I think addresses some of these tensions is we don't get to control other organizations' effort. And it's sort of, it's obvious when you say it like that in simple words, but we often forget that. And the third one, which I wish I could sort of say, have some deeper answers about, but there's this sense that shared solutions work for shared problems. Unless we're coming together as a community to talk about the things that we share, and we instead perhaps think only about the differences or the things that are special for our place, we're not going to come up with an effective shared solution. Now, having said these 3 fairly pithy things, I'm now sort of going to go on a bit of a journey around them without really addressing them very specifically, but forgive me. First, a little history. How did FOLIO come to be? And I had some really great discussions with a number of people to try and come up with what I think is a simple and hopefully not wildly inaccurate picture. While not a direct antecedent of FOLIO, Kuali Ole was a project started in 2008 with a significant amount of Mellon funding and a collaboration of universities, which had an interesting centralized development model, money resources pooled, directions set, things done. And at some point, the Ole collaboration made a hard pivot away from that. There were issues with the underlying technology and the direction, and it was decided to abandon the code base after 3 libraries had gone live with it, including Chicago. And at that time, a new collaboration was formed, which included OLE, EBSCO, and Index Data, and a new project called FOLIO. Doesn't inherit any of the code from that previous project, but there's a sort of OLE connection, which is relevant to many universities, including mine. And starting in around 2016, this project started with this sort of tripartite governance and structure around it. And then we come to 2019, 2020, where we had a really significant change. There was a new folio governance model, and the community formed as it is now, and OLE itself was dissolved. This also represented a change for universities from a very significant enforced membership fee to an open community with lower voluntary membership fees. So that changes somehow the dynamic of how effort is funded and how work gets done. And this is the model we're using now. A few numbers to look at the current folio community. We have, I believe, over 100 libraries live with folio right now. There are 43 institutions that are members, and this is not just not just organizations that are using folio, but also organizations that are contributing to folio. So somewhat less than half of the organizations running folio are members, and there are different levels. You'll note in terms of the scale of the project, rather modest membership contributions. So that's this year. Last year's budget amounted to about $500,000, also a relatively small number, about half of which went to technical infrastructure supporting community development. Another chunk went to support developer and documentation. There was a decision by the Community Council to explore the idea of a community developer advocate this year instead of a centrally funded developer. And then there are other miscellaneous expenses. But the scale of centralized expenditure is relatively small. So how much effort goes into building folio? I've been doing a bit of work to ask lots of people what amount of development effort. So this is developers, POs, QA, whatever, not including all the huge amounts of subject matter experts, SIG contributions, and all that. Just something I could try to get a hand on. How much is being contributed to developing the shared folio code base? Almost 160 full-time equivalents. That is a really big project. So that's takeaway number 1 from this slide. Takeaway number 2 from this slide is that there's a really big blue portion on this picture. That's effort funded through EBSCO. EBSCO staff and EPAM teams are funded that way. So it's about 3/4 of the effort going into folio. But the third takeaway, which I don't want anyone to ignore, is that there's still another quarter. And that's a completely significant portion still that's coming from a large number of different players in the community. And I've tried to sort of enumerate them in different ways, and I apologize for anyone I've missed out. But we have 3 things here. Really big project, EBSCO's the largest player, and yet there's still very significant effort from elsewhere. So one of the distinctions between this project and perhaps others with more centralized governments is that exactly 0 of those FTE are directed by the product council to do a particular thing. You know, I don't want to diminish the importance and the value of the product council and other councils. They have very significant influence, but they do not directly set the development agenda for any team. They have essential coordination roles, they set standards, they lead to a quality product, but that is different from directing the team. And that's something I think is not always internalized as we think about how the community works, and something we really do need to sort of say, yep, that's how it is. One of the things that has come out of this understanding is that we had sort of a mismatch between what the governance document said the product council would do and what they could do. It said, they set the roadmap. Well, what we've got now, and there was a really good presentation on Tuesday morning, the update, which I would encourage you to catch if you haven't already seen it, is we have a reflective roadmap. We have something which is an understanding of who is doing what, up to some distance in the future. What teams have actually committed to do some bits of work, what can we expect to come, which is not the same as the product council having said that will be what we want someone to do, it's what is happening. So we have to get comfortable with this idea of a lack of a central plan or even a particularly predictable schedule. It's an agile project after all. But the value of sharing plans so that others can see them, can see the gaps in them, can, as a result of that, think about expressing needs, influencing directors, can maybe connect with others to see how we can fill gaps for a particular need. I guess it's a rather long in the tooth example, but for example, when we were coming up to go live, it was clear that a particular thing we needed, single record import, was not going to happen. So we clubbed together with some other people to make that happen. And there are other examples, but just everyone having a good understanding of what's happening, I think, is enormously useful. So where are we now? We've done great things. We still have work to do for Folio as an ILS. So this is kind of reflective of sessions already today. We have bugs and technical debt. We need to enable broader contribution. And we still have exciting new features coming, two of the big drivers being Library of Congress and the consortia work that's going on. But I don't want us to lose sight of important elements of the original LSP vision, the idea of apps that plug into a platform, not limited to ILS functionality, an app library, some people say app store, and a community that enables organizations and groups to work at the right granularities, facilitating innovation. So to wrap up, I think understanding where we are now, we need to think a little further forward than maybe we have been. This is perhaps partly a luxury of an organization that's already gone live. But what's our next overarching vision? How do we understand the shared dreams, perhaps not of the very large Folio community, but of meaningful sub-communities within Folio that might want an app that's relevant to them, perhaps not relevant to all? And how should the community structures and governance evolve to support the participation and the future we want? So that was my lightning talk. I'd be happy to take questions if there's time, or comments or discussion. Also on chat if anyone wants to. It's that plain, that is simple.
It's actually more of a comment than a question, because I think my comment is more like, at least thanks for putting, because I think that provides a lot of context in the background to understand some of the other discussions that have happened, or topics that have come up generally at WOLFcon. Not understanding like how long it's been around, I don't know, with the re-architecturing, understanding, maybe why these comments, what with EBSCO versus the rest, is that proper or not? That's maybe where these kind of comments have come from. Understanding indeed, okay, we need more developers, we need more participation, why, where, how, having this here context at the background can help maybe either put these conversations into like help with the conversations, support those conversations. But I think you have very broad topics, and maybe they can serve as visions, as like, you know, to help add content to the more detailed conversations on these other aspects. Yeah. So it was more like, thank you for this.
Oh. Yeah. I'm looking at a chat which I don't see any questions there. No one's clicked on it. Right. Yes. Okay. There is no question in chat.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, thank you. I agree with that analysis. I think that was a very insightful way of summarizing some where we are and the challenges. Optimistic and happy to see some of the solutions, like the one you mentioned of several universities, including Cornell, bonding together to solve actual problems. Do anything. Hello. Oh, sorry. I heard some similar conversations today about solving workflow in a similar way of interested parties getting together to do it. I agree with the vision. We're all part of the community. We can all find subsets of our community to work together to build what we want to build.
Okay. Well, perhaps we'll pass it over to Anya.
We'll start at the end.
Sorry.
We all need.
Don't get me to do tech support.
I might need my notes. Sorry. Hello. Is everyone tired? Yeah. All right. Me too. So, so forgive me at the beginning. So my name is Anya Arnold. I am a librarian. I've been in this field for a little over 20 years. I used to work for another library vendor. Then I made my way to a consortia and then individual libraries and then back to a vendor, even though I said never again. What I learned was never say never. So we're going to talk about change. And as from my brief description of myself, you've seen I've gone through a lot of changes. And all of those changes required a little bit of pain. And I had to choose that pain. I have to actively engage in that pain and just surrender to it, accept it. My whole team did an improv workshop at the beginning of this week. Great team building exercise. But, you know, we had to learn how to accept the do's, right? I don't know if you've ever done a improv workshop, but I highly recommend it. I'm not going to read these quotes to you. You're welcome. But these quotes are things that we tell people when we want them to accept change, right? We tell them, oh, diamonds are made under pressure. You aren't given more than you can handle, right? If it was meant to be, it would be. It's not fun, right? Right? But when it's you that have to accept that change, what emotion do you have? Please tell me, yell it out. Anxiety. What else? Fear. What else? Frustration. Discomfort. Anyone excited? Oh. Anticipation, exhaustion. Oh, Huda, thank you so much. That's a great one. Yes, we fear and feel all of those things. And that is okay. Okay. Because all change elicits this response. Okay. We go through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I love how depression is on the upswing. Right? Anybody else feel that's weird? This is actually the response for grieving as well. Okay. So if all change elicits this response, that means that we go through this cycle internally, sometimes very quickly, like in a matter of moments, and sometimes we go through it very slowly, right? So a quick example of a small change is, oh, the room has changed, right? Oh, I thought I was presenting in a smaller room today. Really? Do I have to do it? All right. I guess I'm there, right? A bigger change is that we lived in Ohio for a very long time and we accepted a job in Oregon. Oh my goodness. What can I do? Who am I going to go to the doctor for? What are my kids going to do? I don't want to do this. I guess we can do it. It's all right. And now we're there. I'm no longer in Oregon. That's 5 moves ago. So once I did it once, I knew how to move from state to state. And I became okay with it. I became really good friends with the moving company. And now I get a 10% discount. So if anyone needs my name, I have a good mover. So to bring this back to work, an ILS change is also like this, right? We choose a system. We're super excited that we finally made a choice. Our staff and other local people start familiarizing themselves if they hadn't already. And then they start to compare it to the old system. Right? All of the hates and the dislikes that they had of that old system become the wonderful things that they don't want to give up. Right? Bargaining. And then something kind of changes and they're like, oh, well, I guess I could do it this way. I can see how I can do this differently. And then they start to adopt procedures and optimize their workflows, right? Every person in a library since an ILS change is an enterprise level change. It's not just something that sits off in the side. Everything is based off that ILS. So every person, every top department, every library goes through this at the same time. So we're all angry. We're all in denial. We're all angry. We're all bargaining. We're all depressed. And then we accept it. Right? How much fun is it to go through an implementation? Those of you that are going through it or have just completed it. Are you surprised I used the word fun? It can be fun. There are people that really want to do this change, right? There are people that really do not want to do this change. Sometimes I like to get those people. My favorite people are the people that don't want to do the change at the very beginning, right? And if I can win them over, if I can just find one thing that they're excited for, I know that those folks are going to be my best advocates to the rest of their team, right? They're going to prove that you can get to the other side of this loop. Okay. So how can we all navigate this and make this a little bit easier? First, I love this little ad or comic strip because we do have to articulate our assumptions. If you can't see it very well, imagine an apartment building. The top is some rock and roller. Middle people are grumpy. And then the bottom people are having a good old time, right? So they're the ones being loud, but the middle people think it's the above people, right? And they're, oh, those people. So we have to articulate our assumptions about what the system is supposed to be doing for us. What is this change supposed to be doing? If I got a new phone, why did I get it? Right? What's the advantage for me to have that? What's the advantage for my library department to make this change? And actually write it out loud, or write it out loud, say it out loud. We're all in Zoom. I have someone on my team that's like, the phrase, take this offline, doesn't exist anymore because we're all online. Where do you take it? So we need to articulate, write it, state it, scream it from the lungs, what our assumptions are about this change so that we can remember that and actually hold the system either accountable or change what our assumptions will be. We also have to say goodbye. For those of you that attended a session yesterday, you heard that I like to tell a story about Massey, who actually held a wake for their previous system. What they did is that they had their staff write out all the things that they disliked about their system before they purchased the Folio, before they went with Folio. Now, some of those things became, as I said earlier, things that they loved during the implementation process and that they missed. They wrote poems. They had a cookout. They sang songs. And they said goodbye. And because they said goodbye to their system a little bit early in the implementation process, it allowed their whole staff to be okay with what came next. So saying goodbye to the old is okay. When I moved from state to state, I said goodbye to my doctors, right? I said goodbye to my friends. I didn't just disappear. You have to take the time to say goodbye. You also have to have some vision, a clear vision of where you're going. When I moved across the country from Ohio to Oregon, if I didn't know where I was going to land, that was going to be a problem, right? We had to have a house, right? So you actually have to say, we're going to implement Folio. We're going to do this. It's going to be great. And sell that vision. Win the hearts and minds of yourself, of your staff, of anything. Because when you don't, the details get in the way, right? Tactics get in the way of a vision if you don't have a clear vision. When you have a clear vision, tactics help you get to that vision, right? So how many steps does it take to migrate to Folio? Anyone know? Answer? Anyone know who this Al is? Or am I aging myself? You know, it's how many licks does it take to get at the bottom of this Tootsie Roll Pop? 3. No. So I really think actually it's the world may never know on how many steps does it take to implement Folio. So all change for all the libraries is different. Folio is a consent first system. You have to tell it how to behave. And that is what's beautiful about Folio. That's what's beautiful about what we have designed as a community, is that it doesn't have a pre-designed paradigm for how you're supposed to behave in it. But that also means that you have to design it individually, right? It's hard to make that first step, but we can do it. We can do it together. So the world may never know, but what we do know is that change is hard and it's painful. But once we're on the other side, we're like really proud of ourselves of doing it, right? We got it done. But I attend this conference, over this last week, and I am like filled with good pride. And I think that anybody that's been here for a little while also feels to say, oh my goodness, look how far we've come. We have over 100 libraries using the system. 4 years ago, we didn't. 4 years ago, we had one. It's quite impressive what we've done. So even though change is hard, we can do it. Thank you.
Questions or comments for Anya?
You guys lovely. You accept it. You're in acceptance mode. Perfect. All right. We'll let Wilhelmina go and I'll stop sharing. Maybe I'll have Simeon do his own IT.
Wilhelmina, are you able to share now? Right.
Yes, it wouldn't let me before because I can't bump anyone.
We can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Can-
Heather says she can hear online. Is Peter here?
Okay. Oh, there's no audio in the room. Can people hear me like right now? And the reason I ask is because I have like a button on my headset that will
I could
turn the
unmute my
mic.
computer and put it into the mic, but that sounds risky.
So I know people on Zoom heard me, but can people hear me like right now? Because there's a button on my headset that will turn my microphone on and off. So I messed with it while people were saying they couldn't hear me. Okay, great.
Okay. It's coming through my computer. It is working.
Well, so is there a plan for like the room?
Can you hear? We can hear.
Oh, okay, great. All right, well, I'll get started then. So my name is Wilhelmina Ranke, and I am presenting about software testing and how to design a software testing process for everyone, including if you are not deep in development. First off, a definition of software testing. I've defined it as making sure the software does what it's supposed to do without doing anything extra. If you test and you make sure your software does what it's supposed to do without doing anything extra, you'll be in a good place. So why do software testing? If you do software testing, no matter who you are, it'll result in better service and better scheduling. So better service because anything special that your library is doing, you can test and you can get attention early and comprehensively to any problems with that. So examples of common things you might be doing is special use of a local MARC field. The MARC standard has all kinds of detail and complexity that developers will handle. And part of that is that maybe there's a local MARC field that you can use in a specific way. And because you can use it in a specific way and the standard does not define or specify what the specific way is. Those kind of little quirks are things that you can get attention for. Also facets. So if you have something like when somebody searches, they can go to the library building, then go down to see what floor something's on, or sort of facet to anything. Any ways that you've configured it, those might be local to your library and not general. If you focus on those things, you can get attention to them. Then better scheduling. Testing is usually done after an upgrade, when there's a new feature rolling out, or if you make a configuration change. If you plan out a time for testing and just schedule that time, make sure you have a good test procedure and get everything done, you can schedule your time better than if you have unscheduled fixes that pop up later. So you can avoid that unscheduled time later if you test and flesh out all the problems right at the time you make a change. So who is talking about software testing? As it turns out, big, complicated projects tend to post more information. That is an image search for a software testing diagram, and a lot of those are complicated. And even the ones that look simple, if you were actually to click on them, they'll say things like user acceptance and user stories, and they're kind of like you have to look up things to figure out what they mean. So finding entry-level information is not necessarily going to be easy with a Google search. That is the same for the Folio project. So when I looked for Folio software testing, what I found was software testing for people who are deep in the code. They're developers. They have a development server, a test server, a production server. The table of contents is over here. And if you scroll down, it accordions out and it has specific technologies. It's oriented around people who are working at a more complex level. So the people who are working at that more complex level have to post information in order to coordinate with one another. It takes multiple people to do this. They spend all day doing this. And so that's what they can post and talk about, or they'll spend a significant amount of time. If you go and you're just wanting to learn about testing in a casual way, like for your maybe not casual, but for one area of something, and you find this is not really helpful if you're buying from EBSCO and you're working with just a specific area of Folio. So if a test procedure covers every workflow, it's going to be long and complicated. And also, if a test procedure covers someone else's workflow, it probably doesn't cover your workflow. So it won't have the things that you're doing locally, your locations, and what's appropriate depends on who you are and where you are, right? So it's a different test procedure would be appropriate for someone who's actually putting code into the open source project or doing a lot of development than it would be for someone who's not. I'm advocating for or talking about a simple approach to software testing. This is my two-step planning how to test any software you have, and that is to take your library's own training material and then click through each task that you would train employees on or train users on. When you do that, you control the time commitment. So if you have training materials, you've probably typically worked with those, worked with people on those, and you know about how long it takes to go through training any task. When you're planning out testing after a software upgrade or a configuration change, you can know ahead of time how long that testing will take without having done extensive testing before or done that process before. You also can prioritize what to test. So if there's a configuration change that might affect circulation, you could just do your circulation training and use that as a test procedure, or you could just do cataloging if you did a change that might affect cataloging. Another advantage is that this will help to test out your library's most important tasks. So each library is going to have different most important tasks, right? Somebody who is doing a lot of in-house development will have different most important tasks than someone who's not. If you train someone on that task, then it's important to you. So your training materials will show you what's appropriate for you to test. The next thing is your instructions probably already have screenshots. And if they don't have screenshots, they'll probably have like a step 5 and then step 6 builds on it. So this is what's supposed to happen. When you're testing for the software doing what it's supposed to do and not doing anything extra, when you have those laid out steps like you might use for training or teaching someone to use your software, you'll usually have the next step. If you realize something went wrong, that's really helpful to already have documented so you can send it to tech support or go over it with someone who's able to fix the problem. Then anything custom at your library is already in your instructions. So your library's locations are there. If there are quirks about how patron identifiers are assigned, that will be in there. If you have customized options in a drop-down menu or in your search, that will be in your training material. So it will fit your exact situation and be a match for what you're doing. I have 2 examples of designing a software testing procedure. So first is when I was deeper in the tech. In my previous job, I worked at the Florida Virtual Campus, and I had eventually been the product manager for the Florida Islandora platform, which was an open source digital library platform run at the consortium. So run on servers in-house with a significant amount of customization and used by more than 20 libraries in Florida. This was our manual that we put out to libraries. This, if you were to click into everything and print it out, it would be more than 200 pages. It covers all kind of detail. To systematize software testing for doing upgrades there, what I had done is actually work through this and identify every single task in it. Because if we train on the task, it's a task you can do in the software. There was also a Duraspace manual available. That one was potentially useful, but the issue is that there might be modules or functionality that existed that we were not using at the state level. What that resulted in, so me going through and identifying every single task that was in that manual, was a long, complex test. And that fit the context of me being in a cloud-hosted group that was running software. So that's a screenshot of it. Anything that was in there, right, is kind of grouped around sections that were in that training manual, and then a long test procedure. And it was long and it got even longer. So this is kind of screenshots of an early version of it. And sometimes the task or how to do it even said, okay, well, it's upload a JPEG and here's where you can go on a shared server and find a JPEG that's already there. So you just grab it and upload it as opposed to going and looking for one. It had problem files, so PDFs that had derived from PostScript and might have like a funny artifact inside of them. It was long and complicated, and it took a couple days to do, and did that on development, tests, and production. But there I was in the cloud, so spending a lot of time benefited more than 20 institutions. The next example I have is in my current job, using someone else's code. So in something where it's a lot more of a grab and go situation. And that was upgrading Iliad. Iliad is interlibrary loan software, and we run it on a server in-house at Georgia Southern, but we don't like write code for it. We just grab the code for upgrades, and we're basically upgrading so that we don't have problems that occur from maybe something becoming obsolete. We basically want to use the software, but we don't customize. Now, the software company that makes it has a manual that is just about as complicated as the Florida Islandora manual had been. So this manual has all kind of instructions to click into. It would be really, really long if someone printed it out. It might be the case that you would think, oh, to develop a more systematized kind of way of doing an upgrade, that what I would do is go through this and pull out every single task. But that does not make sense for using sort of shelf-ready grab it and go software. Instead, I use the same process to do a testing plan. So looking at the training material at my library, which now was not the cloud-hosted group doing development, but instead was a user trying to just kind of grab that software and use it to do day-to-day tasks. And I looked at my training material in that new context. So that was in two areas. The interlibrary loan librarian had done onboarding for employees for several years, and she had her materials that she used for doing onboarding. This had sort of like her notes to herself, and then she had a more formal onboarding that she would do when she was training with people and working with them. I had very simple notes, which mine was basically like setting up new accounts when an employee got hired at the institution. So setting up their affiliate account. And between the two of us, we wrote this test procedure, which is very, very short. And it says, look at common tasks. Common tasks, though, is defined by, we had looked at the onboarding instructions. We were just like, okay, here is the set of onboarding materials that we'll click through. And so doing that, we were able to just have like a simple test that took maybe a little bit less than 2 hours, but had us step through the most important tasks at Georgia Southern and included screenshots of things like, we have 3 different locations. So in the software, making sure those 3 desks were still set up. So it fit our situation and was done using the same process to develop a test plan as the really complicated test had been. So if you want to do software testing, which you probably do to be able to predictably find all kind of bugs or errors or know that they're not going to show up later, right after a software change, instead of having them surprise you later, a simple approach to that is to look at your library's own training materials and then click through every task that you train employees on. And if you do that, that will help your test plan to be something you can design without taking a software testing course or getting into too much complexity in software. And the test procedure you have will fit your institution and how you're using that software, whether you're doing in-house development with a high level of complexity, or whether you're just grabbing some shelf-ready software and using it to complete your day-to-day work. Are there any questions?
I can't move, so everyone should just press anyone.
Any questions?
It might be for this. I don't know if people would want to like cut off my audio and then I type answers because of the feedback loop.
We don't have questions in the room. We don't have questions in the room, and I don't see any in the chat at the moment. I think, well, I mean, I did answer Anya's question that there are actually only 3 stages to a migration: is do your testing materials, test with your testing materials, and then switch over, right? Sorry, I have to cut your audio off, Philomena, before I can speak. Otherwise, we get the feedback. But I will just switch you back on in case there's anything else you wanted to say.
Oh no, that's okay.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending. I guess we get to break this session a little ahead of schedule.